The sliding doors at JFK breathed out a gust of cold air as I stepped inside, my travel coat buttoned to the throat. Passport in hand, the terminal buzzed with families heading toward destinations promised by blinking screens. Rome, London, Tokyo. For me, it was Paris. At 71, I was about to see the city Robert and I had always spoken of, though we never made it there together. My daughter Maurice had said this trip would be our Christmas gift to one another, a final holiday before her children grew too old to be persuaded into family memories. I wheeled my small suitcase toward the check-in line, heart lifting at the thought of the Arc de Triomphe glittering under winter lights. Then Maurice touched my arm. Her lipstick-red smile carried the sweetness of sugar, but none of the warmth. Oops, forgot your ticket. Mom, maybe next trip. The words, light and casual, sank sharp as ice. I laughed at first, waiting for her to hand me the boarding pass. Instead, she shifted her bag higher on her shoulder and turned back toward Evan and the children. A pit opened in my stomach. I pressed forward to the counter, slid my passport across, and asked the agent to check. Her fingers clattered on the keyboard. I'm sorry, Mrs. March, but you're not on this passenger list. In fact, there's no reservation under your name at all. She tapped the flimsy piece of paper I had pulled from my purse. This isn't a boarding pass, just a printout, no seat assigned. The truth unfurled with cruel precision. I remembered Thanksgiving, when I had lingered in the hallway long enough to hear Maris whisper to her sister, "She'll finally learn money doesn't buy her a place." I had dismissed it then, convincing myself I misheard. But standing at that counter, watching my family avoid my eyes, I knew the words had been a confession, not a slip. Tears stung the corners of my eyes. But I refused to give her the satisfaction. I straightened, tucked the false document back into my purse, and smiled with as much dignity as I could summon. Enjoy Paris. I hope it's everything you wanted. By the time the taxi door closed around me, the shock had hardened into something colder, steadier. Reaction was panic. Response was power. And I already knew which one would carry me home. It began on an ordinary October afternoon, the kind where the leaves in Westchester drifted like embers across the lawn. My phone rang, and Maris's name lit the screen. I answered with the familiar hope that she might be calling simply to ask how I was, not to request a favor. "Mom," she said, her voice threaded with excitement. "What if we all did something special this Christmas, one last magical holiday together before the kids get too old to care?" I closed my eyes, the ache of Robert's absence settling against my ribs. 5 Christmases had passed without him, each one quieter, lonelier. The thought of filling that silence with laughter from Rhea and Leo, of seeing Maris choose me instead of tolerating me, felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "What do you have in mind?" I asked. "Paris," she said quickly. "The lights, the markets, the Eiffel Tower. The kids will remember it forever. Evan and I have been looking at hotels near the Arc de Triomphe. It's pricey, of course. But think of the memories." She didn't need to spell it out. I had been her ledger for years. The one she turned to when her mortgage sagged or tuition crept too high. My heart wanted family. My wallet always delivered it. Consider it my gift, I told her. Within a week, I had wired payments for first-class flights, a luxury suite, a Versailles day tour, a dinner cruise along the Seine, even tickets for the Moulin Rouge. Maurice's emails were cheerful, brimming with details I barely glimpsed before she said, "Leave the planning to me. Mom, I'll handle all the bookings." At first, I swallowed the odd discomfort, but every time I asked to see confirmations, she deflected. "You'll spoil the surprise." She insisted, Evan stood behind her with those guilty eyes that looked anywhere but mine, yet he never spoke. The children, innocent as ever, only chattered about croissants and the Eiffel Tower. I told myself not to doubt, yet deep inside, the woman who had balanced a school district's books for 3 decades, who had checked every column twice, knew the truth numbers don't lie. People do. It was only a matter of time before those numbers betrayed the story Maris had built, and I would be left to face what she truly intended. 2 weeks before the flight, I stopped by the cafe downtown to pick up a bag of beans Joyce had recommended. The place hummed with chatter and the hiss of the espresso machine. As I stepped inside, I spotted Maris in the far corner, her head bent close to her sister. "Celeste," I nearly called out, but then I caught the sharp edge of Maurice's words. "Mom thinks money makes her indispensable," she said, stirring her latte as though it were an afterthought. "This time, she'll learn she's not wanted." Celeste looked uneasy, lowering her voice, but the damage was already done. My legs locked, and I pressed myself against one of the wooden pillars, the shopping bag heavy in my hand. The air smelled of cinnamon and coffee, but I couldn't taste anything past the bitterness that climbed up my throat. I could have walked over, demanded an explanation, but what would that have accomplished? Maris had already delivered her verdict. So I turned quietly and left, carrying her words with me like shards of glass under my skin. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table and began printing every email, every receipt, every booking code she had forwarded. If she thought I was naive, she was mistaken. My years of ledgers and budgets had taught me that paper trails never lie. Joyce noticed my tension the following afternoon when we met for our usual walk. "You've been chewing your lip for a mile, Evie," she said. "What's going on?" "Something smells wrong," I admitted, tucking my scarf tighter. "But I'll wait and see. Numbers will tell me what words won't." The next day, I bought 2 things, a small AirTag that could slip unnoticed into Maris's luggage and a box of heavy stationery I hadn't used since Robert passed. One to follow her steps, the other to leave my words where they couldn't be ignored. By then, I had stopped asking whether she was plotting against me. I only wondered how ready she was for me to answer in kind. When I stepped through my front door that night, the silence of the house pressed against me. But it steadied me too. I hung my coat, put the kettle on, and let the familiar whistle of boiling water remind me I was home on my own terms, with a mug of Earl Grey warming my hands. I opened the thick binder I'd compiled every receipt, every email, every booking code Maris had sent me. Page after page bore my name, my credit card, my billing address, my authority. The truth crystallized with each sheet. The entire trip was mine on paper. Even if they had chosen to erase me from the picture, I set the mug down and picked up the phone. The hotel near the Arc de Triomphe was first. "Yes, Madame March," the agent said after confirming the details. "Your suite can be canceled at no penalty." A click of the keyboard, and nearly $4,000 slid back toward my account. The airline took longer, but the result was the same. The tours, the Versailles day trip, the Seine dinner cruise, even the Moulin Rouge tickets all reversed with polite apologies and digital confirmations that landed in my inbox like small victories. Each message was another stitch in the fabric of control I had quietly reclaimed. Before bed, I opened the AirTag app. The signal pinged thousands of feet above the Atlantic, safely tucked inside Maris's carry-on. They were mid-air, sipping champagne, dreaming of Paris. They had no idea that each mile carried them closer to an empty itinerary. On my printer, a sheet of heavy stationery slid out, crisp and final. Since I wasn't invited, neither is my money. Actions have consequences. Earlier that day at JFK, I had slipped copies into her makeup bag. She would find them soon enough. I closed the binder with calm hands, the plan set in motion, and waited for Paris to learn just how quickly luxury could turn into air. By the time their plane touched down, my voicemail was already filling like a floodgate had burst. The first messages were frantic with confusion. Maris insisting there must be a system error. Evan trying to sound calm while his voice cracked. Hours later came the sharper tones, words sharpened to blame. Then the pleading began, one message layered after another, each more desperate than the last. I ignored them all until a softer voice reached me. "Grandma," Ria whispered, her words trembling. "Dad won't tell us what happened. Mom just keeps saying everything's fine, but nothing feels fine. Please call me." I sat at my kitchen table, pressing the phone to my ear as if holding her hand through the line. "Sweetheart," I murmured, even though she couldn't hear me in real time. "This isn't your fault. Adults make choices, and sometimes those choices hurt the wrong people." That night, Evan tried again, his number flashing across the screen. The message he left was quieter than the rest. "Mom, I didn't know it would go this far. Please, just talk to me." I turned the phone face down. Sorry wasn't a currency that cleared debts. I opened my banking app and locked the credit card Maris had been using. I knew her pattern when one door closed. She reached for another. By morning, the bank confirmed an attempted charge at a boutique hotel in Paris had failed. I pictured her at the desk. Plastic, declined. Charm, failing. Children, restless by her side. 2 days later, a voicemail arrived in clipped tones. This one from an unfamiliar number. "This is the Paris Police Prefecture. Your daughter and son-in-law have been detained after attempting to leave their hotel without payment." The officer explained the children were present, frightened but unharmed. I let the silence hang in my kitchen before answering. "I'll cover the basic hotel balance," I said firmly when the call came through again. "Room and meals already consumed. Nothing more." The officer agreed. My account shuddered with the transfer, and I pictured Ria and Leo finally released from that gray lobby, spared at least that humiliation. As I set the phone down, relief for my grandchildren tangled with the cold knowledge that mercy could just as easily be twisted into leverage. Snow drifted across the driveway as I stood on the porch, coat buttoned and gloves tucked tight. The headlights swung into view, cutting white beams across the yard before Maris's car lurched to a stop. She slammed the door, her boots crunching hard against the ice. "You ruined everything," she shouted, her voice carrying sharp enough to sting. Her cheeks were flushed with cold and fury, her hands balled tight. I stayed still, my breath clouding in the air. "No, Maris, you ruined it yourself." My voice was calm, deliberate, the way I used to sound in front of a classroom when children tried to test the rules. Behind her, Evan lingered by the car, his shoulders hunched, his eyes avoiding mine. Ria and Leo slipped out too, silent, watching. It was Ria who stepped forward, her words cutting through the cold. "Mom, stop. We know Grandma paid for everything. I saw the statements." Maris froze, the fight in her eyes flickering. Ria's voice didn't tremble. 5 years of checks, $200,000, mortgage, car payments, tuition, even groceries. "Grandma's been holding us up, and you pretended it was Dad's income." Evan pressed his lips together, his shame heavy in the air. I looked at him for a long moment, but he said nothing. "Family isn't a salary," I said quietly, turning my gaze back to Maris. "It's respect, and I don't see any of that from you." Her chest heaved, breath rising in sharp clouds. Then she screamed, voice raw enough to echo down the street. "Then you'll never see the kids again." Ria gasped, but I didn't flinch. I stepped down one stair, close enough to meet her eyes. They'll turn 18 soon. You can't weaponize them forever. One day, they'll choose who they want to see, and when they do, you may not like the answer. Maris's face twisted, but she said nothing. The snow kept falling, soft against the heat of our words. As Rhea reached for Leo's hand and guided him toward me, I opened the door and let them inside, leaving Maris on the driveway with the storm she had chosen. The office smelled faintly of leather and old books, just as it had the first time I stepped into it 20 years ago. Atticus Hale rose from behind his oak desk, his silver hair catching the light from the window. He had always been steady, unshaken in voice, precise in words. Exactly what I needed now. I want everything on record. I told him once I sat down, no loose ends. He adjusted his glasses, his fountain pen poised. Start with the children. Yes. Education trusts for Rhea and Leo. Ironclad. They can use them for college, graduate school, whatever path they take. But Maris and Evan must never have access. He nodded, scribbling notes. And the rest, I'm removing Maris and Evan from my will. The house, investments, everything beyond the trusts will go to charities. The library foundation Robert and I used to support. The hospice that cared for him at the end. Places that understand respect better than my own daughter. Atticus let out a low whistle. That's significant. Once this is filed, it can't be quietly undone. That's the point. I said. My voice didn't waver. She wanted me erased. Now I'll make sure she can't spend her life cashing my checks. He looked at me steadily. Expect backlash. People who feed on you never leave quietly. Then I'll meet them with receipts. I replied, not regrets. 2 days later, the documents were signed, sealed, and witnessed. I slipped copies of the formal notice into envelopes addressed to Maris and Evan, effective immediately. No more mortgage payments, no more car notes, no more tuition checks. The support had ended. I thought silence would follow, but instead came the twist I should have braced for. A letter from the county clerk arrived, informing me that Maris had filed a complaint of elder abuse. She claimed I was unstable, pressured by outside influences, incapable of making rational decisions about my estate. For a moment, the insult stung deeper than the betrayal in Paris. To be dismissed not only as a mother, but now as a woman losing her mind. I folded the notice carefully, placed it back on the table, and called Atticus. The fight had only just shifted to a new stage. The courtroom was cool and hushed, wood-paneled walls pressing the weight of judgment onto everyone inside. I sat beside Atticus, my hands folded neatly on the table. While Maris paced a step behind her attorney, she wouldn't meet my eyes. Her lawyer spoke first, his voice sharp as a gavel. Your Honor, this case is about a vulnerable 71-year-old woman being manipulated into making rash, cruel financial decisions. My client fears her mother has been unduly influenced and is no longer capable of rational judgment. The words pricked, but I kept my gaze forward. Atticus rose slowly, unhurried, his calm presence settling over the room. Your Honor, he said, what this case is really about is money. And when you follow the money, the story speaks for itself. He clicked the recorder, and Maris's own voice filled the courtroom. Mom thinks money makes her indispensable. This time, she'll learn she's not wanted. Her mocking laugh echoed against the wooden walls. A flush spread across her cheeks, but she crossed her arms and looked away. Next came the digital evidence. Atticus projected the AirTag log, each ping marking the luggage's journey across the Atlantic. Mrs. March wasn't hallucinating or confused. He explained. She was tracking her own property in real time. Finally, he placed the binder of receipts on the bench. Page after page bore my signature, my credit card, my payments for 5 years' mortgage checks, tuition bills, car notes. The judge turned the pages slowly, her face growing sterner with each one when both sides rested. The judge leaned forward. Her voice was steady, unyielding. Evelyn March, your clarity is not in question. Your daughter's motives are, Maris's lawyer stammered. But the gavel came down. Final and absolute. The complaint is dismissed. All estate documents and trusts are upheld in full. The silence was heavy. Evan dropped his head into his hands, shame painting his face pale. Maris's lips tightened, but no words came. I gathered my papers, my heart steady. As we left the courtroom, Atticus touched my elbow. It's finished, he said, but I knew some endings echo louder than others, and mine was only beginning to settle into place. Months have passed since the courtroom doors closed behind me, and the rhythm of my days has softened into something steady, almost tender. My new apartment overlooks the Atlantic, the salt air drifting through open windows. On the sill, jars of roses catch the morning light, each cutting coaxed into bloom with patience I didn't know I still carried. Joyce visits often, usually with a bottle of champagne tucked under her arm. We sit by the window, clinking glasses as waves crash against the shore. To freedom, she always says, and I never argue. The phone rings with Ria's voice, breathless with news of her college acceptance. Her laughter fills the line, bright and unguarded, and I promise her that the trust will carry her wherever she chooses to go. A week later, a letter arrives from Leo, folded around sketches of lighthouses and seabirds. His drawings are clumsy in the sweetest way, but each one speaks louder than words. I'm still here. Grandma. Sometimes Evan appears at my door, quiet as a shadow, leaving groceries or small gifts without expecting conversation. He doesn't excuse himself for the past, but in his silence there is something like contrition. Maris does not come. Word drifts back that her reputation is in tatters. Her bridges burned one by one. I water the roses, watching their petals catch the late sun, and let the thought settle where grief once lived. I mistook blood for love. Respect is the air that keeps us alive. If betrayal wore your child's face, would you forgive or finally breathe free?